Hey everybody, hope you guys have had a good week. I hope you guys are staying active, I hope you guys are staying healthy, and I hope you're wearing your masks outside. We want to get back in the classroom as soon as possible, right? Okay, so today we are going to learn about the impact of history in music and how it affects everything about music, from composers to the composition style to the way we play music, everything, okay? Okay, so the first thing whenever discussing these things is to make sure that we understand the different musical eras. First, we have the medieval era from 1150 to 1400. We have Renaissance era from 1400 to 1600. We have the Baroque era from 1600 to 1750. The Classical era from 1750 to 1830. Romantic era from 1830 to 1920. And the 20th century starts about 1900 and goes to about 2000. And the 21st century goes from 2000 to the present. If you notice, we have the Romantic era from 1830 to 1920, and the 20th century starts at about 1900. So there's about 20 years of overlap right there. So the reason for that is the Romantic era and the 20th century, we start seeing signs and styles of the 20th century as early as 1900, but we also see really prominent styles of Romantic era up until 1920. So it's really important to understand that overlap. It's not necessarily an definitive date, but it's kind of like an overlap of dates. Okay, so the biggest thing that is affected by history and the events going on around us are style. But that's not the only thing that's affected, right? We have things like tonality, style, and overall structure of music as well. All these things change based on the different time periods or the different events that are going on in these time periods, the different people that are living, the different technology we have, the different instruments we have, all these different things. So this quote, it says, "Music expresses that which cannot be said and on which it is impossible to be silent." So if you take this quote apart, the first part says, "Music expresses that which cannot be said." So things that people are not allowed to speak about, things that were going against the government, things that people would get in trouble for saying, and then on which it is impossible to stay silent. So things that people needed to speak about and that needed to be said, but they couldn't say it because they risked getting in trouble. Another example of this at the same time would be authors using their literature as a form of expression when they're expressing their discontent with the government or different social issues that are going on. They would use fictional characters to describe different events in their stories that kind of represented the things that were going on. And composers did the same thing. Composers used musical styles. They would use lighthearted things to make fun of things. They would use more intense, more dissonant minor keys to describe discontent or angst or displeasure, whatever. So what are some of the things that can affect a community? So we have things like the economy. Are people living in poverty? Is the composer living an elite life? Are they living with royals? What kind of economic lifestyle do they live? Government issues. Who's in control? Do they have democracy like we have? Are they living in a communist country? What kind of things are going on in the government at that time? One that we're affected by now is pandemics. Are we living at home? Are we out and about seeing different things? What kind of lifestyle are we living? And then wars is a big thing that we have to deal with as well. So a couple of examples of these, we have the Age of Enlightenment from 1715, which would happen to be in the Baroque era. We have the Industrial Revolution, which is in 1760, which falls at the very beginning of the Classical era. And then we have, obviously, World War I and World War II, which happened in 1914 and 1939, and it put it towards the beginning of the 20th century, the end of the Romantic era. So for your homework, we're going to be using compare and contrast of two different eras to represent or to show different styles and how these different events in different eras affected the style of the composition. So I put an example. I did Baroque and 20th century. So for Baroque, the big things that characterized the music, we had long flowing melodic lines. So we had a lot more lyrical styles in our pieces. We had excessive ornamentation, more turns, more grace notes, more things like that. We had elaborate dynamic contrast, a lot of really loud louds and a lot of really soft softs suddenly. So a lot of contrast between the volume of the pieces. And then instrumentation. If you think about it, in the Baroque era, around the 1700s, we had a lot more string instruments. We didn't have a whole lot of wind instruments. So string instruments are capable of different things than the wind instruments are. So it's really important to understand the style of the pieces and the way the pieces are written for which different instruments are available at the times. The 20th century, the things that kind of classify that, we have unconventional meters. So things like 12/8, 16/8, things that are just kind of out of the box that we're not used to, like our standard 4/4, 2/4, 3/4, those kind of things. We have increased use of dissonance and consonance. So these really crunchy chords that we hear in music, we have an increase of those. And then that lead to things that just sound more final, more major chords. We had a lot of composers test the idea of tonality. So these composers were really trying to test what we knew and test the limits of musicality. So we had a lot more, like I said earlier, we had a lot of more dissonant chords. Overall texture of the pieces, which leads to like instrumentation and all that kind of stuff. And then towards the end of the 20th century and leading more into the 21st, we had inclusion of technology in music. So things like computer sounds, like we had synthesizers, we had all those kind of different things. So we're going to listen to 2 different pieces. In your homework, you're going to pick 2 pieces from each era that you decide to pick. And you're going to listen to them, and you're going to compare and contrast the 2 pieces and understand how the styles of those eras that you picked are reflected in the pieces. So first, we're going to listen to my example from the Baroque period. It's Vivaldi's Four Seasons. Oh,
Tonight,
okay. So
I'll be eating.
Whenever we're listening to this, I want us to really pay attention to the things I was saying earlier. In our slide, we had the ideas of longer flowing melodies, ornamentation, things like that in our pieces. Hopefully we don't have another ad. Whoops. Okay, bring it back a little bit. Or play about 30-45 seconds of this. Hear the difference in the dynamic contrast there. Very loud at the beginning, then more soft now. Again, dynamic contrast. To the ornamentation, listen to this. We have a lot of grace notes in this section. We have obviously a lot of stringed instruments here too. So this piece is very standard of most Baroque pieces. Vivaldi is a very prominent composer during the Baroque era. Okay, so the next one we're going to listen to is going to be Steve Reich's Sextet. Oh, we're going to bring it back a little minute. Whoops. Again, listen to the instrumentation, listen to the different tonal things you hear. You can hear the shift in meter, you can hear the difference in chords. Again, I was talking about technology, so the synthesizer. And obviously, you can see the different types of instrumentation. We have more percussion instruments now. We have 2 synthesizers and we have 2 pianos. Okay, fast forward a little seconds. Oh. That's how technological sounds are more prominent in this section too. The meter contrast. Again, instrumentation. So that goes back to what I was saying about how composers of the 20th century were really testing what we knew about music at the time. So this slide, historical events change everything about our lives, even includes music. So I wanted to include this picture. If you really look at this picture, you can see that there are 4 red lines, and then there's little black dots all over the red lines. So long time ago, this is how they wrote music. So as things in history changed, like things like the Industrial Revolution or the printing press, whenever that was invented, and then it allowed people to, or composers specifically, to print more of their music and get it out to people, get it out more to the public. But in order to do that, we had to have a universal style of notation. So with that, we had to, like I said, universal style of notation, so we had to completely change the way we wrote music, the way we read music, and the way music was played. So this, I wanted to show that musical shift between regions. So while things are going on at the same time, they may not necessarily be happening in the same places. So the Industrial Revolution had swept across the world, but just because America was going through it doesn't necessarily mean that China is going through it. So the difference in the areas around the world indicates what kind of styles we're going to see at the same time. Okay, so for your homework, I want you guys to find an article about two historic events happening in 2 different time periods, and I want you to write a 1-page reflection comparing and contrasting those events and really describing them. In this 1-page reflection, I want you to determine which musical era does the event take place. And again, you should have 2 separate eras. How might the event affect the composers and their works, like their lifestyle and all that kind of things? Style. How does the time period affect the style, like I was saying earlier about wars and all that kind of stuff. And how does this affect the performance of the piece, okay? And then next, I want you to find a piece. I want you to find 2 separate pieces. You're going to find one from each of the eras that you were speaking about, and then I want you to play and record yourself sight reading the pieces. And in your recording, I want you to really show the style of each piece. So like I was saying, for Baroque, if it's Baroque, I want you to show the dynamic contrast. If it's 20th century, I want you to show the dissonance and the different tonality differences. So yeah, so after you guys do that, you'll post them online, and then I will evaluate them and give you guys a grade for it. So that's pretty much it for this lesson. I hope you guys are staying safe, and hope you guys have a good week. If you ever need anything, my email inbox is always open. Have a good week.